Hey everybody, today Tony and I are testing out the Epiphan Cloud, which consists of Unify and Connect, and also Edge, which allows you to manage your Epiphan Pearl Nano devices. So Tony, say hello, Tony.
Hey everybody, how are you?
Tony's down in North Carolina. I'm up here in Connecticut, and we are screen capturing and sending feeds all over the place. So we're going to try to walk you through exactly what we're doing to test this out. Just full disclosure, thank you, Epiphan, for sending over an Epiphan Pearl Nano device, the actual piece of hardware. And also thank you for allowing us into a sandbox for Unify and for Connect to be able to do this demo and try it out. So first, let's talk a little bit about the Epiphan Cloud and what it consists of. So I mentioned the Edge. So that's where we're looking at right now. And this would be if you had multiple Epiphan devices. So Epiphan makes hardware devices. They're encoders and decoders. They do SRT, RTMP, HLS, and they can take feeds in. So they can take video feeds in as well as audio feeds, and then they can encode them out to a destination. So they can be standalone devices, or they can work with the Epiphan Cloud, and that's how we're using it today. So this is where you would see this particular device, which Tony's going to talk about in a minute, is down in North Carolina in Tony's studio. I'm up in Connecticut. We can actually get into the admin page from the cloud and make changes. So if this device was living somewhere in a network rack or wherever, we could actually make those changes from here. So if we go down live script and CMS events, we're not going to cover today. Those are other features of the Epiphan Cloud. If we go over to Connect, what Connect is it actually connects into your Zoom meeting and allows you to extract video via SRT, secure reliable transport, pull that out and send it to SRT destinations. In this case, we are sending it within the Epiphan Cloud over to Unify, which is a cloud switcher of sorts, and encoder. But if we click into that, you can see Tony and I are both in the Zoom meeting, and we also have a return feed. So Epiphan Connect joins the Zoom meeting, and then you can see all the participants, and then you can send right now up to 4 participants out an SRT to an SRT destination. In the future, they say there will be more, and you can also send a return feedback into that Zoom call via SRT, which we are doing in Unify. I know there's a lot of acronyms and names here, so we'll try to reiterate things. So if we go over to Unify, you'll see we have a project that's set up. And if we click over to the admin login, which I actually already have up, we see a page with lots of different things you could do. But before we get too far into that, Tony, why don't you just explain a little bit about what you have down in North Carolina with the actual Pearl Nano?
Sure thing. Thanks, Joe. So, like Joe was saying earlier, I want to just send a special shout out and thanks to Epiphan for sending us first the trial for Epiphan Connect and Unify. And also, back here, I have the Epiphan Pearl Nano. I'm using it as an encoder right now. I am powering it via PoE, so that's a nice feature of the device as well. It's got a beautiful display on the front, nice controls for navigation, and I am sending an SRT feed up to Unify, and Joe is pulling in that feed in Unify in the layouts, which he'll get into in a minute or two. He'll show you that. But it makes it really simple. The nice thing about the device, like he said, it can work as a standalone encoder decoder, but we also have it right now paired with the Epiphan Cloud, so it's making it super simple for us to transport the video over the internet up to Unify from the studio here in North Carolina.
Great, thanks, Tony. So I think that's a good place to start. Is we'll start with the inputs. The screen may be a little bit daunting if you've never seen it before. It actually looks almost exactly the same as the admin page for the hardware devices. So if you do purchase one of the Epiphan Pearl or Pearl Nano devices, you might be already familiar with this. But essentially, you have inputs and then you have your channels. and your channel consists of layouts. So think of different looks. So if you had like a 2-up or 1-up or a video roll or different things, that would be your layouts. And we'll get into that in a minute. And then you can choose different encoding settings and then where you're going to stream it out to. But first, let's talk about inputs. So think of this as a cloud switcher. And the first input, which Tony just talked about, is the Epiphan Pearl Nano. So there's Tony on the screen. And it's a little bit delayed. This is just a preview. If we're not sending audio right now because we're actually doing this, Inception recording here, where we have a Zoom on top of a Zencaster on top of SRT stream. So we're trying to keep it all together. But that's Tony's preview that you'll see, and this is coming directly from his studio into the Epiphan Pearl Nano, and then he is sending an SRT feed as the caller, and this is the listener on this end. So how we set that up was we went to add input, we chose an SRT input, and then I gave Tony this URL. He plugged that into the Epiphan Pearl Nano, and then we started the stream. And if we want to delete this input, we'll do that. Now, the second input we have here is Epiphan Connect. Now, that's what we were talking about that connects into Zoom. So you can see my face there because I'm on the Zoom call and I'm actually extracting my clean feed of just me. If we go over back to Connect, back to the Epiphan Cloud, go to Connect, click into the Zoom meeting, you can see I am connected here. If I click right here, you can see the actual statistics. If I were to try to send Tony, I could either choose an Epiphan device and send it directly. So I could send it to the Unify project, the switcher, or I could send it directly to the Pearl Nano, or if I had other devices, or I could send it to really any SRT destination as either the listener or the caller. So Connect is actually really how we got started in this whole conversation about Epiphan, because I was looking for a solution to make Zoom farms a little bit easier. And that's, if you're not familiar with Zoom farms, that's where you have multiple computers all pinned with contributors to a production. So that's the intent of Epiphan Connect, is to be able to extract directly from the Zoom cloud, so to speak, the Zoom mixer, and pull those clean feeds and then be able to send that somewhere with SRT, which is a low latency, usually a lot lower latency than RTMP. So back to Unify. So we're actually taking my feed that's in Zoom, sending it over to Unify via SRT. And there's my image, a little bit delayed. And that's another input on the switcher. So Unify doesn't have a graphics generator other than being able to add text. And you'll see that when we get into the layouts. But they do have the ability to reach out to a web graphics generator. So we've made a couple of lower thirds. Tony, do you want to talk a little bit about that, of what you're using to do that?
Sure. So to bring in external graphics using a web URL, I'm using a program or a website called overlays.uno. There are free accounts, there are paid accounts. I'm currently using the free account. And basically what I do is I go in and I could search for all different types of graphics. We're going to demonstrate lower thirds in this case, but you set it up. You have full control of the graphic as far as size, color, theme, all that stuff. And you physically turn it on and off through the overlays.uno web user interface. So the nice thing about that is I can control graphics remotely for a show and turn them on and off through the overlay.uno web interface. All we have to do to plug into Unify is the URL from overlay.uno, and then the control is all done remotely off-site. So we'll demonstrate that here in a few.
Thanks, Tony. So you can see the two lower thirds. We can also do all kinds of different graphics, but these are, Tony basically gave me this URL. I dropped it in, and then now it's acting as another input on the switcher. Below inputs, you do see the configuration tabs. There are options to automatically, when you're recording, you can record. We'll get into that when we get into this channel at the top. But you can automatically upload those files, either FTP or rsync or even AWS S3. Those of you know, I do a lot with AWS, so that is interesting to me. Time zone some security. You could build in certificates. Media is really what I want to show here. You can upload video files. So imagine a countdown, which we actually have, prior to your show, and you want to run that, or you want to run a video mid-roll or mid-show, and you can upload that here. There is some limitation, though. The video has to be less than 512 megabytes in size, so you can't upload a very large video. So I had to compress these down. These are just 2 videos I had on my computer. Once you upload a video to media, it's then available for you as an input. It doesn't show up in inputs, but it's available for you when you start building out your layout. Unify and Connect run in the cloud. So this is actually the IP address that when you start up a project, you'll get an IP address. So that's what this is. And you also get a host name for DNS. You can see we have a 10 gigabit link up in the cloud. We're sending out 21 megabits per second, and we're receiving 13. Now that 13 is coming in from Tony via the Pearl Nano, and also coming in from the graphics URL. All right, so let's head over to channel 1. When you click onto channel 1, you get more drop downs. And the first option is status. So you can see what is actually going out the switcher. And next we go into layouts. So we currently have 2 layouts. We have a 2-up with a video roll, and we have a countdown timer. And this is an actual video file. So if we take a look at the countdown timer, if we were to go to add new item, I have options of video source, video file, picture, and text. So if I choose video source, I can go over here, and these are my sources from the inputs on the left that I have. I'm going to X out of that one, and we just have this video file. So we'll hit save when we're done. So if we go over up to the 2-up, so on the top left, Tony is coming in from the Epiphan Pearl Nano. I'm coming in from Zoom, but through Epiphan Connect and then into Unify here. On the right-hand side is actually a looping video from a podcast that we produce. And then there is some text. So if I click onto any one of these elements, there are also 2 lower thirds that we haven't rolled in yet. So if I click on any of these elements, I can actually move them around. So for example, if I wanted to move this video and make it in the top right versus in the center, I can do that. I can choose if it's infinite loop or if it stops after one time. I can change the background. So not a ton of options here, but enough where you can build a basic layout for what you're doing. And then you can switch between, you can add another layout. So you have the options to switch between different looks.
So I just want to interject, when you're referring to layouts in Unify, for those of you out there that are familiar with using, let's say, OBS, it would be similar to creating scenes in OBS, correct?
Great point, Tony. Yes, exactly. And you might say, well, how do I switch between those? That's where you're actually, if you see this little button that says switcher here, if you click that, you're going to be brought to a switcher. It's a very simple user interface, but this is a preview and this is a program. So program is what's on the air. So if we were to hit switch, it changes from what's in preview to what's in program. So now the right-hand side is what's actually going out to our destinations. So we'll go back to the countdown timer, and the countdown timer is just looping. So it's, but in a real show, we might have a 1-minute countdown timer, and then we might have this 3-up or multiple input display. So if I had more layouts in this, they would show up here underneath, and I could just drag them into the boxes or click on them, and they would go to preview, and then I could switch them to program with the switch button. So it's pretty straightforward, user-friendly, but it is a separate page than your actual admin console. So those are layouts. We're not going to get too much deeper into it, but essentially you can make some basic graphical changes and multiple boxes on the screen. You can bring in remote lower thirds and graphics from a remote source via URL. So if we go on to the next section here, it's encoding, and you can go all the way up to 4K if in regular 16:9 video. Right now we have it set at 1080p. Next tab down is metadata. And the next tab down is streaming. So this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time. We are sending out 3 separate feeds, as you can see here. The first one is a return feed to Connect. So when you're in Zoom, you can see on my screen, there's the countdown clock. So that's coming from Unify. It's rolling that video, going to Connect via SRT, and then Connect is actually injecting that into this Zoom call that Tony and I are both in. The use case for this is your Zoom callers who are contributing to your show may need to see program or hear program. Now, it will be on a bit of a delay, so interacting between program and those who are in the Zoom call is not that simple. But if they just need to see kind of where they are in the show or what's being played, then it's a handy feature to be able to actually send the return feedback into Zoom from Epiphan. So that's the first feed we're sending out, and that's via SRT. The second feed we're sending out, and by the way, we're going to delete these stream keys, but you can see our stream key to the Streaming CT YouTube channel and also the Quick Tech Solutions YouTube channel. So if I were to bring up a Chrome tab with my YouTube channel, which is Streaming CT, you can see the countdown clock, and this is also coming from Epiphan and Unify. And Tony, the same thing. Now, these are unlisted streams, just so they don't go out to our channel subscribers. Tony's got 20,000. I have 90, so Tony's kind of in the more important boat here. But definitely subscribe to our channels while we're on that topic. Streaming CT and Quick Tech Solutions, L.L.C, for more videos like this. But anyway, you can see that we are sending out to this channel. And Tony, I assume you can see the same on your channel. So let's click back over to the switcher. And I'm going to switch. Let's imagine our show is starting. So I'm going to switch to R2 up, which you'll see me coming in from Zoom, Tony coming in from the Pearl Nano, and then a random video playing and some random text. And you'll see that switch over on YouTube momentarily. There's a bit of a delay because it's got to go through RTMP. We're sending RTMP, not SRT, to YouTube. There it goes. It just popped into YouTube. So Tony's going to put up one by one, first his lower third that he built on overlays.uno, and then my lower third on overlays.uno. Now you can see them come up in the switcher. There'll be a slight delay in YouTube because we are sending RTMP, which is going to take a little bit for YouTube to catch up, but you should see them pop up on the right-hand side of the screen in just a moment. There it is. There's Tony's. And there's mine. So like Tony was saying, if you had someone who was just running your graphics, they could actually be using overlays.uno separately. And then we just have the URLs plugged in to Unify. And seamlessly, the graphics can come over the top of the video screen. Now, one thing to note, I'm just going to make this full screen again. If I go back to layouts and I look at these items, I do want to have the lower thirds on the top. So if you've ever used Photoshop or something similar, if you drag these, they're like layers. So you want the lower third. So anything graphics that's essentially, think of it like a downstream key. So it's kind of the last thing in line. You want those to be on the top, or else my video might cover the lower third, if that makes sense. So if I were to put Tony's down at the bottom and hit save, and then go back to the switcher and go back to the 2 up. Tony, would you mind putting both the graphics up again? Now, Tony's likely won't be shown. Only mine will be shown until I move the lower third back up in the layers. So we can see it in the switcher. Should show up on YouTube in just a second. And there you go. It's not on Tony's. But if I come back here, Tony, leave those up. If I come back here, drag the lower third up to the top, hit save, and then go back to the switcher. Now you can see that they're both there, and it'll pop in on YouTube in just a second once it catches up. So that's one thing that might be tricky if you didn't know that existed. And there it is on Tony's screen as well. Another quick note is at the bottom of the layout screen, you do have the option for which audio you want to use. Um, you may want to use some or all or none of these audios. So if I didn't want the audio to play on this video, but I did want Tony and my audio to come through, I would uncheck that and hit save. Lastly, let's go over to recording. Now I am recording, and there's a couple of things to note that I've noticed. One is you have some file limitations. So 30 minutes and 500 megabytes. When we were testing with 4K earlier, it was breaking up the chunks into 3 minute and 3 second, or I guess 3 minute and 4 second here chunks. And that equaled about 500 megabytes. So you would have to download those chunks and put them together in your editor after the fact. Now you could use the automatic file upload, but just note that it will chunk your files. It's not going to be one large file. And usually that's, and I don't know this for sure, but usually that is so that if there was a corrupt file, it doesn't take out the entire file. It just takes out a particular chunk. But something to notate is that you will need to do some editing after the fact with these chunks of files, but it is editing in the cloud. And you do get looks like 33.63 gigabytes when you start a new Unify project. You can see we've been recording for 36 minutes. Eventually we will run out of storage. To zoom out a little bit and go back kind of to the basics, when you log into the Epiphan Cloud, if you want to create a Unify project, a cloud switcher, you click on Unify and then you create a project. So I had already created this project, but if I wanted to create another project, let's say I was working on a totally separate stream for a separate customer or something else within my company or school, I would create that new project. Every project costs $25 each when running, so you'll have to know that. But let's do test 2, create. And now that is actually spinning up a server in the cloud on the back end. So it will take a little bit of time. And same thing with Connect. When you're joining it to a Zoom call, so if I hit Zoom, you're going to enter the actual URL for the Zoom call. You can choose to join as guest or to actually join as a authenticated user. And then you can also choose whether you want each SRT feed coming out of Connect to be isolated or mixed. When you hit Connect, it takes about 5 minutes, and there will be a pop-up that the host of the Zoom call needs to actually click grant permission, and it will show that it's streaming from Unify Connect. Even if you're not going out to YouTube, it's going to show that you're streaming from Epiphan Connect in the Zoom call. So people know that the video from this Zoom call could be streamed on the internet or recorded or something. So once the project is up and running, that's when you can click into either the switcher, which is this, or you can click into the admin console, which is this. You can create the channels. You can have multiple channels within the admin console as well. And when you're in the switcher, this drop down will show you the different channels. So each channel could be streaming. So within a project, so you have projects, then you have channels. So each project could have multiple channels, and each channel could actually be streaming to multiple destinations. But within a project, you're limited to whatever inputs you have. But let's say you had two different streams. You had like a stream that was going to a select group of people, and then you had like a broader stream that was going to, the broad 1,000 group of people. You could actually do that with two different channels.
Joe, talk about the other option that Connect offers. Besides being able to extrapolate the Zoom feeds and send them directly to Unify and keep everything within the cloud, you also have the ability, let's say you wanted to send those extracted feeds to Studio's control room. That's another option. It doesn't have to be sent directly to Unify and switch everything in the cloud. You can actually switch in a local studio remotely. So just maybe you want to just touch on that aspect and how you could possibly use the Pearl devices to ingest those streams coming from Connect.
Yeah, if we go back over to Connect, let's just jump in here, and you can see that we can have participants. We can pull the primary speaker stream. We can pull the screen share, which I am screen sharing. So you can send SRT. SRT is a common language, secure, reliable transport. And Epiphan makes devices called the Pearl Nano, and maybe others in the future that will accept an SRT feed. Now, I didn't realize, and I don't think, Tony, you did either, that these devices could actually be an SRT decoder, because they're not really advertised as that. If you Google SRT decoders, you're going to find lots of other brands and companies. But once we met with Epiphan, they said, no, you can actually pull those feeds down to the Pearl and Pearl Nano. So that's what we've been testing with. But we also have been testing with other SRT decoders, and it works just fine with those too. If you have a control room that uses Magewell, for example, SRT decoders or some other brand, you're able to pull the SRT feeds for these Zoom calls down to those decoders. So imagine you have a rack with decoders, and on the back you have SDI outputs, and you're sending that into a bigger switcher or something else, or into an ATEM. You can do that. So you don't have to use the Epiphan hardware, but it does work really well because, for example, if I click start, if I do manual SRT, I then have to either be the caller or listener. We have to deal with either, if I'm the listener, then the other end is the caller and they can make an outbound. But if I'm the caller, then the other end has to do port forwarding and actually open up a port on their router, on their firewall, to be able to set that up. If you're using an Epiphan device, it's just in the drop down. So you can just choose, you can see Joe and Tony Pearl Nano test. I can just choose that, and I can send the Zoom feed directly to that device, wherever that is. So if I had a few of those in my control room and those were plugged into my ATEM Extreme or 2ME like Tony has, I could just take those feeds directly in. And it looks like it's contributing from, I mean, the feed looks great. It also resizes. So even if you're getting 720p from the contributor, it's actually going to resize to whatever you choose. So you can choose 1080, you can choose your frame rate, you can choose your bit rate, and it'll get more constant, because a lot of video switchers do not like the fluctuations that you get with Zoom. So that's another kind of benefit of using something like this. Zoom ISO is another way to do it. There's others out there that actually talk directly to the Zoom mixer, the Zoom Cloud, using essentially raw data. It's their set of APIs that people have built upon. So, but this is nice because it's in the cloud. It'll just send to your SRT decoder. That's the only hardware you need, is to be able to decode that SRT feed. In fact, even OBS can decode SRT feeds. So you can take in an SRT feed from Epiphan Cloud, from Connect. Everybody always asks about pricing. You can find pricing on Epiphan's website, but in general, these are going to have a set monthly rate and then an hourly rate, and that could change depending on when you're watching this video. But you'll want to make sure that you shut down both your meeting in Connect and also your Unify project when you're done, because there are servers on the back end running that, and it will continue every hour to charge you. So, for example, this test project that we did, we are going to stop that. That way it stops the server and we stop getting billed. So, Tony, what thoughts do you have on this? I know you and I have worked together. I did most of the talking in this video because I'm doing the screen share, but what are your thoughts on like the whole process as we work together on
Well,
this
thanks,
project?
Joe. And yes, let me thank you for taking the lead with this video. I know it was a lot, but I do appreciate it. It's been fun testing. It's been a learning experience for sure, for me, and I think for you as well, to see what is available in the Epiphan product family. So if you're looking to produce a show and you want to keep it, pretty straightforward in the cloud, have remote contributors, remote people working graphics, remote producers, things like that. Give Epiphan Connect, Epiphan Unify a look. It might be perfect for your use case. Not saying it's a one size fits all solution, but it's definitely got its place out in the video world. So, on that note, I want to thank Joe for leading you all through this video. It was fun for me to just help, chip in and do a little bit of my part here on the remote side. I'd like to thank Phil over at Epiphan for working with us and making this trial sandbox account that we're playing with available to us, as well as sending us the actual Pearl Nano. And we do have one. It is actually right here. We are not lying about that. It's right here. So again, thanks to Epiphan, thanks to Phil, thanks to Joe for making this all possible. If you'd like to learn more about the products and the services that we talked about, or that Joe primarily talked about, just visit epiphan.com and you'll find pricing and all the different solutions available to you on their website. So let us know what you think about Epiphan, the products that we showed you, the services that Joe shared with you. Let us know, is there a use case for you in your video production world? Let us know down in the comments below. To see more content like this, please click the video on the screen. Thank you so much for watching.